Thank you for checking out this episode of CTRL ALT STORY, a podcast where I have conversations with people who work in and with technology, go through their career journeys, dive into career advice, and even share some fun stories along the way. My name is Josh Spurgeon, and I'm a watsonx technical specialist at IBM. I can also be found under the name Data Nerd Josh on various social media platforms such as YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. My guest today is Jeff Crume. He is an IBM Distinguished Engineer, CTO, America's Security Technical Sales, and Master Inventor. That sounds like a long title. That's because he's a man of many, many talents. I want to, of course, dive in from his perspective of what he does here at IBM. Before that, though, I'll read a little bit of additional information that I found about him. I just want to paint the full picture of Jeff. So 40 years of experience in the IT industry, almost 42. He has a PhD in cybersecurity. He serves as an adjunct professor at NC State University. He has a YouTube channel that's been viewed, I believe, around 5 million times. So I'm personally very jealous of that one. And he's authored several books as well. So absolute rock star. And I'm happy to have you here. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
You bet. It's my pleasure, Josh. And some of those things are even true. So there's that.
Well, we may or may not have used AI to generate that. No, I'm just kidding. We didn't.
That's right. That's right.
So, before we get started anything, we kind of went over your titles, what you do. So do you care to just kind of dig into that and elaborate on what it is you do?
Sure. So my day job is in tech sales, and I am a security architect. I engage with clients, trying to help them identify where the gaps in their infrastructure, what are the bad guys going to exploit, and then we try to figure out what we can do to fix that before the bad guys do. And then I also lead a team of about 25 cybersecurity architects in tech sales who are also covering the Americas, North and South. So we cover the entire Western Hemisphere with IBM security software.
All right. And for anyone listening who may not know, IBM security portfolio, do you care to name a couple of products that they may not be familiar with or ones they can research later?
Yeah. The main ones right now these days are related to identity and access management. And those are all, there's a number of products there, but they're all called IBM Security Verify. So Verify is kind of the brand name for those things that deal with identity management and governance, which is creating your accounts, deleting your accounts, modifying your capabilities, and then access management is the other side of that, like authentication, proving you're who you claim to be before we let you into the system. So that's kind of the verify side of things. And then the data security is the other main area that we focus on, and that is in the IBM Guardium brand, and that's where we're doing encryption, access controls, and things of that sort. One of the new areas we'll be focusing on is quantum safe crypto, because quantum computers, as wonderful as they are, they're going to come break all our crypto. And we're going to have to figure out how to, we in fact have new algorithms that we can use that we believe will be safe against the quantum menace that I refer to it as. But it's a matter of doing the conversion over and creating that kind of agility. So that is a new area of focus for us. And then another area is AI. For the last couple of years, the number one thing that I'm asked about from chief information security officers and people like that is, how am I supposed to secure AI? We know we're going to have this in our environments. We probably already have it and don't know about it. So there's a shadow AI issue. How am I going to lock all that stuff down and make sure that the bad guys aren't exploiting it? And then there's a whole other aspect of, the bad guys are going to use it to do attacks as well. So there's kind of, how do I secure my AI? How are the bad guys going to use AI? And then the third one is, how can the good guys use AI to fight the bad guys? So kind of three different aspects. Those are really the things that I spend most of my time focusing on.
All right. That's fantastic. And for anyone listening, I just wanted to be fully transparent. No, I am not a security guy. I do not have a security background. So for anyone listening, you're going to be learning right alongside me, because security is on my background. I know it's important, but I know, don't click the links you're not supposed to click on. But when it comes to,
don't ever click on anything. Just turn off all your computers and go live in the hills.
There we go. That's the best security advice we're going to get today, right?
That's right. No, actually, I don't. There, you would take that away if you spend too much time talking to security guys, they'll scare you to death, and I may as well. But for what it's worth, I see this always as a balance. You put the right controls in place, and you'll never get to a zero risk environment. Zero risk also means zero return on your investment. So you need to get to a manageable risk, and everybody has a different tolerance and appetite for how much risk they'll take. Some people. Yeah, I used to work with a guy who would not get in an airplane, so he took trains everywhere. He lived in Chicago. It took him 4 days to get to San Diego. I fly in airplanes. I don't mind taking that level of risk. 4 million miles in the air, so I've taken that risk many times. I got a neighbor across the street from me who jumps out of perfectly good airplanes, and I don't understand why. So each one of us has different tolerance for risk. And that's how you look at security as well. He feels like it's not a big risk because he's got the security mitigations. He's got a parachute. For me, that's not enough. So everybody's going to choose your own path on this. Choose your own adventure, I guess.
And just, from my knowledge, I know this is kind of a broad question, but when we think about let's say a data breach at a company, is that something that if you look at it on a curve, it's just continually going up from year to year?
Yeah, I can remember when people freaked out whenever there was a data breach. Now, we just call that Tuesday, unfortunately. There are data breaches literally happening, I think, every day. Now, that doesn't make it tolerable. It just means that, unfortunately, it's gone into the background noise for a lot of people because it's just happened so many times. IBM does an annual report. We've done this 19 years in a row where we contract with an organization to go out and interview clients who have had data breaches. And we get some very interesting learnings from those. We see what the average cost of a data breach is just under $5 million on a worldwide. In the US, it's roughly twice that much. So the worldwide number is actually less. And then we're always looking at, okay, what were the things that happened? And you can look at one organization that it cost them this much, at another organization it cost them this much, and then you start looking, okay, what security controls did you have in place? Because the one that had the lower cost, maybe we can learn from them, and that's what we do. I've done lightboard videos, like you mentioned on YouTube, where I try to summarize that report. So that's I look at every one of these failures as an opportunity to learn, and hopefully we don't let a good crisis go to waste.
Yeah, you got to pull some kind of good out of it. Help the next person,
Absolutely.
help the next company. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So I do have a couple of questions I wrote down that I want to ask you about. It's kind of related to AI or cybersecurity. Before we get into that, though, I was hoping you might could kind of take us back and go through maybe not the full everything, but kind of your career journey of how you, not like before IBM, how you got here, kind of what led you to your role today.
How I got here? Well, my parents met, and then no, not that level. You don't want to go
fast
that
forward
far
a little.
back.
We'll skip.
Okay, all right. Fast forward. So I decided when I ran into computers, I realized that's what I wanted to do in my career. It was for me. There was never a second thought. Once I put my hands on a computer for the first time, I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. I know for sure. So I majored in computer science back in the day. That was 1,000 years ago, roughly. I think I like to tell my students at NC State, where I went to school and where I'm also teaching, that I rode my dinosaur to class. That's how long ago it was. And so I did that. I started working for IBM my junior year of college, working part-time at IBM and full-time as a student. And I've literally been there ever since. October will be 42 years. I have, in that time, been a programmer working on network management software. I've been in the field working with clients in network and systems management, technical sales. But most of my career has been in security, technical sales. And to me, that's my real love. It always was. I used to spend untold hours as a high schooler writing password stealing programs because I was just fascinated with how the systems worked and how you could break them. But I will say in my defense, even though we're past the statute of limitations, I never stole any passwords. I knew how to, but I had enough ethics to know you can build this, but you don't have to actually launch it on the world. And that's a lesson I try to give to my students all the time is just be careful. do this on your own lab environment in a controlled space so that you can do the learning without having to see how you look in an orange jumpsuit, because that's not the outcome most people want. So I've done that again for a long time. I got my PhD in cybersecurity in 2019. So my bachelor's was in '84, and then fast forward to 2019. So a long gap between the bachelor's and the PhD. But to me, that's the reason I bring that up. I believe in being a lifelong learner. And if you say, it's too late, no, it's not too late. If you want to do it, you can still do it. And I've gotten to do that along the way. As you said, wrote a book that was back in 2000 called What Hackers Don't Want You to Know. That was a game changer for me. I learned so much in the process of doing that. Doing the YouTube videos. I'm up to about 80 of these videos now that are out there, and I do them on the IBM Technology channel. And it's been a blast doing this, learning how to do these. Different format. The way you communicate in a 10-minute video is very different than the way you do in a 1-hour conference presentation. And I've done thousands of those, but now I'm trying to learn this new format. So doing those kind of things. Had the opportunity. My job has fortunately taken me to a lot of places. I've been to more than 50 countries in all 50 states, and had a temporary assignment in Beijing, China back in 2006. So it's been a great thing for me professionally and personally to get to experience all those things along the way.
And for anyone who has not seen the videos that he was referring to, I haven't watched all of them, but the ones that I have seen, they're always very informative, very fantastic. And, to me, the key is easy to understand. Like I said, I'm not a security guy, but, when Jeff is presenting, it's like, okay, I get what he's saying. I don't have this background, but I get what he's saying. And I think to me, that's extremely key is to, I don't want to say dumb it down for people like me, but dumb it down for people like me.
No, I mean, I appreciate what you're saying. And some people have asked me, you take those complex topics and make them easy for anybody to understand. I said, yeah, but you don't realize I had to take them and make it easy so that I could understand it. Then it was relatively easy for me to explain it to everybody else because I had to dumb it down for me to begin with. And then it flowed more naturally.
I think that's been the kind of the trajectory of a lot of my career is me figuring out how I can take things and dumb them down for people to understand, but it's, like you said, at the same time, it's like, no, I'm actually dumbing it down for myself first. And then I'm able to explain it to you. And people are like, oh, that guy's really smart. It's like, no, I just spent a lot of time dumbing it down.
Yeah, exactly. I find it's very interesting. I feel like part of my job is as a translator. So I go talk to the guys and gals in the lab or the researchers and find out whatever it is they're saying. And if I can figure out what they're saying, and then I can translate that into plain English so that other people can understand it, and then go back, take their feedback and go back to these other guys and say, okay, look, this is what people want. This is what they need. So I feel like a lot of our job, and yours as well, I'm sure, in tech sales, is about being a translator. Taking those really complex technical things. Nobody's going to buy a bunch of gorp that they don't understand. So you've got to make it understandable and meaningful. And then people will say, okay, now I see why I would need that. So that's a big part of what we do. And think about it, my other hat that I wear tonight is we're starting the new semester again. So I'll be back at NC State teaching tonight. And that's what it's about. I'm going to be talking to mostly seniors, a senior level course that I'm teaching, and it's enterprise security architecture. It's essentially my day job. But I've got to put this in terms for a bunch of students who have little or no real world work experience. But I'm going to try to translate to them what it is we do for a living and do that sort of thing. So I think translation is a big part of what we do.
Yeah, and we're all like that. That is a fantastic point. I mean, and that's something I've honestly thought about throughout my career. So just for your information, before I came to IBM, I've only been at IBM for just a little over a year. Before that, I was at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee, which is located in Chattanooga, for 14 years. And all that time I was spent in IT, so dashboards, reporting, analytics, things like that. And I think that was probably my biggest strength in that role was going out and talking to these people who have a problem. We need to get a hold of this data. We need to figure out what this, how to get this report or whatever the case may be. And kind of, like you said, almost like working as a middleman. Like, I'm going to take these things that you're telling me, and I know the back end information, but how do I bridge that gap and then present it to in a way that you would understand it? And you have to kind of come out of yourself and go, the people I'm talking to, they don't do what I do. They're not technical people. They're not, in my case, I was talking to a lot of, like clinical people, like nurses, and they're like, we want to report on XYZ. It's like, well, if you, like you say, come in with a bunch of gorp, they're going to glaze over and be like, I don't know what you're talking about. But, bringing it at a level where it makes sense and not getting into those technical weeds. I think
absolutely right. Completely agree with that. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions for you. I was trying to think of questions. I usually try to think of questions on the spot, but I was like, you know what? I want to write some questions down, make sure I have some good ones for you.
Sure.
So when we think of AI, what is the biggest danger that you see?
Well, so there's a group called OWASP, the Open Worldwide Application Security Project, who has for a decade published a list of the top 10 web application vulnerabilities. And they just last year came out with a top 10 list for large language models. And I glommed onto that and, in fact, did a video on it. The number one that they said, and I was already feeling like this was number one, and then they just confirmed it for me, and that's prompt injection. That's the number one issue with this kind of technology, is that if you think about it this way, the simple way I think to think about prompt injection is social engineering against an AI. Normally, social engineering is what we do against people. It's me calling you up, pretending to be somebody at your company, pretending I'm a support person, and now I'm going to try to talk you out of your password or something like that. It's a con game, and I'm basically abusing your trust. That's what social engineering is. Well, social engineering, social means people. How could you socially engineer a computer that's not a person? Well, guess what? AI is all about trying to emulate human intelligence in a computer. And guess what comes along with that? We trained it to be like us, and it's like us in its weaknesses as well. And that's what prompt injection exploits. It exploits the fact that our AI is very naive and will do what it's been asked to do unless it's been explicitly in its programming told not to. And that's a big issue, because we can end up with all kinds of misinformation that comes out. We can rely on that, and as we become more and more reliant on that information, that's going to be a big deal, because the sources will not be trustworthy if we don't do a good job of trying to cut down on prompt injections and things of that sort. So that's one set of risks against large language models. The other big risk of generative AI is in the area of deepfakes, where someone is able to create your likeness, your image, your voice, and then make a video of you saying and doing things that you never did or said. And if they did that to you, it would be, tragic for you, potentially. But what if they did that for a head of state? What if they did that for the CEO of a company? What if they were able to do a deep fake video call of where they're imitating the CFO of a company and then convince an employee to send $25 million to an attacker? That already happened. Wow. That's not a hypothetical. There was another one where they did it just with audio only and got a person to wire $35 million to an attacker. So we've already had these, and I've got a couple of videos on deepfakes in particular. That's going to be a complete game changer. I think the most important skill that we can teach citizens as well as students going forward is critical thinking. Question everything. If you weren't in the room, then maybe you didn't hear what you heard. Maybe you didn't really see what you saw. You and I've never met in person, but I assume you're real. I assume you're not a deep fake. But even if you were, you and I are just having a conversation, so it's no real damage. But if you start asking me sensitive information, then I'm going to say, you know what? I need to make sure that it's really you and not somebody else. Certainly before I wire $35 million, if I had that to wire. So I think there's that. I think if you start start looking at the implications to the legal system, which is not my area of expertise. I'm not a lawyer, but I'll play one for a moment. Imagine we're prosecuting someone's on trial for robbing a bank, and the prosecution creates a deepfake video that shows the defendant walking into a bank with a gun, pointing it at a teller, asking for money, and then walking out with the money. And they show that to the jury. Every single one of them votes to convict. And that was an innocent person. By the same token, what if we actually had authentic video of the guy walking into the bank and out with the money? All the defense has to do is argue, that's not authentic, that's a deepfake. And now they've created reasonable doubt. The mere fact that deepfakes exist cause a certain degree of chaos, because now we don't know what to trust. And there's a lot of people that say, well, why don't we develop technologies that will detect deepfakes? In my opinion, waste of time. Deepfakes will keep getting better and better and better. They're already to a point where some of the technology you pay for is no better than 50-50 at detecting. And that detection technology is going to get to a point where it runs out of gas. The deepfakes will be so good, they will be absolutely indistinguishable from an authentic video. So that means we have to go back to educating people on what the threat is and looking for other means out of band, not on the same channel that I'm communicating with you on, but through some other back channel to verify before I do important things. I think those are the two big risks that we face.
If anyone like me is listening to this, they're probably a little scared right now, going, "Oh my goodness!"
I told you, you got to turn off your computers and go just live in the hills. That's what everybody does after I talk.
I've honestly been guilty of seeing videos online, and I'll start going, "Is that real?" And then I'll go Google, "Was that real?" It's honestly crazy to think, just in the last couple of years, how much more sophisticated even that's gotten.
In the New Hampshire presidential primary, someone created a robocall deepfake of Joe Biden's voice, calling people in the state, telling them they didn't need to vote in the primary. They should just save their vote for the general election. It was a deepfake. He didn't say it. Now, that didn't really make any difference because he was essentially running unopposed in his party. But what if somebody came up with something on election day and showed one of the candidates doing something absolutely abhorrent? And people say, well, I can't vote for that guy or gal. And then we find out 2 weeks later, it was a deep fake. We don't get to go back and re-vote. The election has already been modified, the results. And, we're going to see this happen, I really believe.
Right. And in this day and age, with social media, people put anything out there and immediately it's shared. And a lot of people are going to take it as gospel.
Absolutely. I mean, we can already see what they do with the fake news already. People will believe anything. I mean, there are people that still believe the earth is flat. I'm sorry, it's not. I've flown around it, so all the way. Kept going, west until I got back to where I started. You didn't see the turtles holding it up or anything? I didn't. Now maybe I was asleep on the plane at that time, but yeah. So there are some subset of people that will believe anything. And I think, unfortunately, people are getting more gullible, not more critical in their thinking. And deepfakes are going to absolutely be a shot right to the heart because they will take full advantage of that and exploit it badly.
It's definitely food for thought. And I mean, I feel like I'm already pretty vigilant about checking things like that. I'm definitely going to be even more so vigilant. Anyone listening to this, hope they will be as well. I mean, any security training I've ever had, it goes exactly back to what you said, which is training people. How do we make sure that they know, let's always check this, report it for phishing, don't click the link. I mean, that's right. To a lot of people, it's common sense, but I mean, obviously, it's not. It's not common. It's not as common as it should be.
No. And you mentioned phishing. Here's another one that's going to be where we're going to see AI implications as well. One of the things that we have trained people in our security awareness training, if we say, what to look for, what clues you in that this is a phishing attack? Well, oftentimes we say bad grammar, misspelling, stuff like that. What if the phisher goes to a chatbot and says, write my phishing email for me? It's going to write it in perfect English, no grammar mistakes, no spelling mistakes, and then put that in as your So if we've had people looking for grammar as a clue and they don't see grammar issues, their defenses will drop. And then again, shot right to the heart. AI is already shown that it can do that. So it's, again, it's critical thinking. You have to stop and think. I'm not clicking on links in an email no matter what. If I need to go to the website for that company, I'm going to go Google it separately and go to that website. If somebody is going to give me an account number, like if I was going to give you my account number over this, I'm not going to give it to you over this. I'm going to say, I'll send it to you. Right now I'm talking to you on my Mac. If somebody had control over my Mac, anything I send to you, they might see. So I'm going to say, I'll send you that from my phone in a text message. Better yet, I'll send half of the information in a text message from my phone and the other half in, say, some other thing like WhatsApp message from my iPad. Now, the bad guy would have had to compromise all three platforms, and that would be hard, and three different messaging mechanisms. So we're trying to make it harder and harder for the bad guys. It's not a guarantee, but one of the videos I did was on a kind of exotic attack called audio jacking, where it basically defeats one of the defenses that people have come up with, where we have a sort of safe word that you and I agree in advance. But we meet in person, and you say, Jeff, if I ever need to know it's really you, I'm going to ask you for the safe word, and you tell me. So if I was a deepfake, I wouldn't know how to answer that question. I wouldn't know the safe word. That's fine. An audio jacking attack, you and I are literally talking to each other, and the deepfake intercepts what we're saying and only substitutes bits of information. So if you ask me for the safe word, I'd give it to you and you'd hear it. If you ask for my account number, I would tell it to you, and then it substitutes in my voice a different account number. You hear something different than what I say. And I don't know that anything's up, and neither do you. Again, there's a video on that if you want to go see how that attack works. That one is a real tough one to defeat. And thankfully, it's hard to pull off as well.
Has that actively happened already, or is this more?
We have only seen a proof of concept on that. There was actually an IBM X-Force researcher that came up with that as a proof of concept and published it, so that to make people aware. Because if the bad guys figured it out, they're not going to publish it. They're just going to do it. Better if the security researchers find it out, publish it, and then we can start working on defenses.
So let's flip the script a little bit to a little more on the positive side. So when we think about generative AI, what is a use case?
You got the wrong guy. I'm a security guy. We don't do positives.
Well, we'll try. We'll try.
I'm kidding. Let's go.
So what's a use case that you believe pretty much any organization could stand up rather quickly and start seeing benefits?
I think actually there's one of those areas of concern for AI. I mentioned the business needs to protect its use of AI. We have bad guys that will use AI. Well, we also have security guys who could leverage generative AI to do a better job of security. And that's one area that I'm very optimistic about. For instance, a lot of time is spent in if a case that we open, somebody tries to break in, and we need to, this person's an analyst, they're not going to work 24/7. So they work through their shift, and then they need to hand it off to somebody else, who then hands it off to somebody else. And maybe it's a long-running case, and it's a couple of weeks. And the boss comes in and says, where do you stand on this? I need to report to the board. Well, do we want to take the analyst time to go read back through all the case notes and all the indicators of compromise and produce a report? Or how about we use generative AI to generate a summary automatically on the spot? It reads all the case notes and bang, there you go. You want an executive summary? Got it. You want a technical summary? Here's the bullet points. You want a narrative that goes through the timeline? Here's that summary. That's a really nice use case. And that could that could do that in a minute instead of us spending 2 hours writing a report. That's just one example. Another one, if I'm a cybersecurity analyst and I don't know every detail of SQL commands, but I see a suspicious command as I'm investigating an incident, well, I could take that command, run it in through an LLM and say, tell me what this command is going to do. LLMs, they know language. SQL's a language. It can tell you exactly what the parameters in that form are going to do. So it would explain that instead of you going off and Googling it and then reading through pages and pages. So there are going to be some force multipliers that AI gives us that I think will help level the playing field at least a little bit in this case.
So I'm going to shift gears just a little bit.
Yeah.
I have a 4-year-old, I have a 7-year-old, two boys. And something I've started doing on this podcast is with my oldest son, he's almost 7. I'll give him a little bit of information about who I'm going to interview. And I'll say, do you have a question for this person? And so far, he's had a question for everybody. So I'm going to ask you the question that my 6-year-old told me.
All right. Awesome.
So I gave him a little bit of information. One of them, part of your title is Master Inventor. So his question is, what is your favorite thing that you've invented, and what is the most cool thing? It was just going to be one and the same, but favorite thing you've invented and most cool thing or coolest thing.
My favorite is probably the next one I do, because I'm always interested in whatever is happening next. But I'll tell you, there's a couple of them that have been recent that we've filed for patents on. We're still waiting to hear if we'll get patents on them or not, but I think these are pretty cool. One of them is involved with so if it's one thing if AI can help you diagnose a problem and tell you this is where I think the issue is. But people would like the next step. Okay, but what should I do about it? And if you get a single LLM, it might hallucinate. It might tell you to drink chicken's blood. And you say, okay, but that's not going to really help in this particular problem. Wouldn't it be nice if we could string together a bunch of differently trained on different models and have them all look at the same indicators of compromise, and each one of them come up with a recommendation? And better still, it would be like, instead of calling on one expert, you're getting to consult with a team of experts and then have those sort of debate amongst themselves and come out with what is the recommendation. You could either have one higher level LLM that takes the results of all of those individuals, and then it sort of puts all this together and decides the tiebreaker and why. Or you could chain the LLMs, put one result from one to the next, to the next, to the next. And that way each one is informing the next one of not only what happened, but here's what I think. And then the last one spits out what is the most informed and best recommendation. So that's one that I think is pretty interesting. And looks like we'll, hopefully we'll be able to get a patent on that. But yeah, that's one of the more recent ones in the AI space. I've done some others, but they've all been software and almost all of them in the security space. So I think that's the most interesting so far.
So it's fantastic. So I know that you're a runner. So yes. What is your secret for keeping the running streak alive? I know we talked before. John, you talked about that just a little bit. So I wanted to dive into that.
Yeah, I'm not only a runner, I'm what they call a streak runner, which is not the same thing as a streaker. Let's just be clear.
Okay. I was going to ask, but all right.
Yeah. I am a streak runner, meaning I have a streak of days where I don't miss. And I have run every day for more than 11 years and not missed a day. So that's my streak right now. And what that means is I've got to do some kind of crazy things every now and then in order to keep a streak like that alive. And especially if I'm doing business travel, I had one case where I was flying. I had an overnight flight from Santiago, Chile, and I was supposed to go to Beijing, but I had to do a layover in LAX. And so while I'm at LA the next morning, I realized I got to board the flight in about 4 hours, in which case I'll be on a flight for a long time and I will have missed a day of running, which is not allowed if you're a streak runner. So what am I supposed to do? Well, what I did was I went to the airport lounge. I changed into my running clothes. I carried my ID and my boarding pass, went out of security, and ran laps in the LAX parking lot to keep my streak alive until the police stopped me and made me go back in. So, but at least the streak was alive, and I came back through security sweaty and without luggage, which I'm sure raised a lot of questions. But they said, as long as you got a boarding pass, and an ID, you can come through. So I did. But yes, I had two of the police officers run me down like I had just committed a bank heist or something. But anyway, kept the streak
there's
alive.
nowhere for me to hide the money, I swear.
Exactly. What do you think I just did? It was like a Sunday morning and there was no one out. But oh well. So what I was really hoping, I really was hoping they were going to write me a speeding ticket, because that I would have taken with pride. But no, I wasn't going that fast.
Yeah, you could have framed that and said, look how fast I was running.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If they'd said, we're going to let you off with a warning on that, I'd said, no, you don't. You write that thing up.
So is there a limit to, you can't just go run for 20 feet and call it, like, is there a limit?
No.
An X amount?
There's actually an international standard. There's a website called runeveryday.com, and their standard is a mile. So if you have to run a mile, now it's an honor system. For me, in the 11 years, probably, I don't know, maybe a handful of times I've done only a mile just to keep the streak literally alive. But in general, I do 7 miles every day. That's almost without exception. Yeah. And that's through 2 bouts of COVID. So there's a level of, I'm not saying I recommend this, but it's what I do.
And how long does it take you to run 7 miles? I'm just curious. So I'm not a great runner. Last year, part of last year, I started like this. I was like, I'm just going to go run and see how far I can run. It was not far.
It wasn't far.
Yeah. But over time, a little more. So, I could do a mile and I don't want to die. So I'm just like, how long does it take you to do 7 miles?
There you go. So usually these days I'm getting over bone spurs and a pulled hamstring. So again, if I was smart, I would take some time off and let those injuries rehab, but they've slowed me down, but I keep moving. So now, hour and 10 minutes, depending on, how fast I want to go, but roughly an hour to do a 7 miler. And I have a great place to do it here. So it's really convenient. It is. And for me, one of the things about it is, it's something I can do, and I do a lot of business travel, but it's something I can do anywhere. Somebody says, well, it'd be easier on your knees if you did a bike. Yeah, but do you think I can take a bike on a plane everywhere I go?
Right.
Not so much. And not every hotel I go into is going to have a pool or one that you wouldn't have to do 1,000 laps in to bang out a mile. So it works. I can do it anywhere, in almost any weather and have. And here's what to me is a really interesting thing. I'll tie this back into work. You were asking about the inventions. I think about half of those, and literally every one of the YouTube videos I've done, I have either come up with the idea or modified significantly the idea for those things while I was running. That is a creative outlet for me. I'll set out on a run. I'll go for a mile or two, and then I'll start working on a problem that's been difficult, or thinking about the next video, or thinking about the next invention. And invariably, I will come up with new insights that I would not have come up with if I had just sat at my desk during that time. So for me, it's not just something I do for my body. I think it's something that literally makes me more creative and makes me a better employee as a result. So that's why I'm so dedicated to doing it.
And for someone who, let's say they're like me, not a great runner, but trying to get into it, what's your advice for that person?
Walk. You can get many of the same benefits by doing the same kind of thing. I think a lot of people, if you stop and think, when have you had your most creative breakthrough ideas? And most people will come up with, well, I was driving somewhere on a long trip. My mind was wandering and it hit me. I was in the shower. I was on a walk. So you're doing something that you can kind of do on autopilot because you've done it so much, like a run or a walk. And then you let your mind drift into that area. And it seems like it quietens down for people who are real left brain, like people in our industry tend to be. We tend to be very analytical. This will allow that side to be a little bit busy. And then the more creative, right brainish side can come to the forefront. But I think you can do the same thing, walking, gardening, whatever. some repetitive activity that you do for a period of time. Don't just go into it instantly and think, okay, now I'm starting to walk. Where's the idea? Get into it, get into the flow, and then start ruminating on the idea. And I bet you're going to find that you come up with ideas that you would never come up with before.
I know I've personally woken up in the middle of the night. Went to bed dreaming about a problem I had. Then I've woken up at 3 a.m. I'm like, I need to go grab my computer.
I've had those too, but it turns out when I actually woke up, they were really crazy ideas that didn't work. So in my dream, I thought I had come up with the solution. In reality, I haven't. Not so much. But yeah.
Well, for those who are watching the video version of this, not just listening to the audio, there are several guitars in your background. So I want to kind of tie that together. So when you're running, if you're listening to anything, what's your go-to music?
I used to listen to mostly music when I was running, and just listening to rock, classic rock, that sort of stuff. Anymore, I listen to podcasts, believe it or not. Okay. And I'm a big University of Kentucky basketball fan. I told you I grew up in Nashville, but I was born in Kentucky and have family there. So I'm a big fan of that. And I listen 5 days a week to Kentucky sports, information and broadcasts like that. And then the others, I'm listening to current events, medical stuff, just all kinds of different things to feed my head. And in between, in those moments, sometimes I can kind of tune out what I'm listening to and think about these other things, but those things feed my mind. I get bored easily, and those things help. And that's one of the things a lot of times people say, I get so bored when I'm running. Well, my first answer is facetious. Then that means you're not running hard enough, because nobody's bored when they're gasping for air. That you're thinking about other things. You're thinking about survival. But those kind of ideas. I'll listen to something on a podcast, and that'll give me an idea. And it's like, oh, okay, now I want to go think about that for a little bit. So that's what I listen to a lot. Now, what I play on the guitar is more folk rock kind of stuff, more of the James Taylor, Jackson Brown kind of things. Okay. And yes, I know that makes me old, but.
I'm just in full transparency. One of my favorite artists is Jim Croce.
He was one of my idols. I play a lot of his stuff.
Oh, yeah, I have guitars in my background as well. So when I was in a global sales school last year, so for anyone who doesn't know, if you get into sales or technical sales at IBM, you go through GSS or Global Sales School. Mm-hmm. And there was one day in Global Sales School where I'd mentioned playing guitar and everything. And I ended up, we got on our meeting a little earlier that day, and I played and sang a Jim Croce song for the class.
Nice. So, Which one?
What did I do? I'm trying. Maybe in roller derby. It was Don't mess around.
That's a good one.
Don't mess around. That's what it was. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, nice. I like roller derby queen. Is fun to play, and so is Time in a Bottle, which is darned hard because they do it with two guitars,
right?
And I have to try to split the difference and play both parts at the same time, which is a challenge.
I've tried, and it's not easy. And if I'm doing a Jim Croce song, that's one of those where I'm wanting to sing as well. So the other part you just got to throw it. I was like, I'm just going to play the simple part, throw the rest out the window.
There you go. That's what I'd have to do on most of them. Yes, exactly.
Well, I know we are almost at time, and you are very, very busy man. So I want to be respectful of your time. But before we end this thing, I just want to make sure I say, thank you so much for taking close to an hour out of your day to talk with me today. I know I've learned a ton. I'm a little scared. I'm a little frightened, but I think it's for the good. And I think hopefully anyone listening to this will have the same thoughts. So before we end, I just want to see if you had any final thoughts, anything you wanted to share, anything I didn't cover.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's been my pleasure talking with you. I'll say cybersecurity people, we are experts at finding the dark cloud in every silver lining. So I'm going to focus on how things fail so that I can figure out how they work and how we'll keep them working. And so a lot of times, like I said, jokingly, we're deliverers of bad news a lot. But if we're doing this stuff right, then we're actually helping along the way. It's very easy to become overly negative and overly, the world's, going to end kind of thing. I don't do that. I look at all of this as a way to be an enabler to prevent those bad things from happening. I heard this analogy or this example at a security conference many, many years ago. So it's not unique to me, but I love this what this guy did. He asked all of us, he said, why do you put brakes on a car? And we're all like, okay, so you can stop? And he said, no, it's so you can go really fast. And it takes a second, and then you realize, okay, if you didn't understand that, how fast would you drive a car that had no brakes? You wouldn't. Yeah. So it's only because you have good brakes that you're willing to take the risk of driving fast or going any speed at all. So that's the way security should be. IT security, cybersecurity should be like the brakes on a car. And the fastest cars in the world are the ones that have the best brakes. If you want your business to go really fast, you need really good brakes. You need really good cybersecurity. That means you really need to understand what all those risks are so that you don't just go flying off the track when it's time to turn left. So that's the way I view it, as security as an enabler rather than security as an inhibitor. And too many times security has become an inhibitor. So I try to, in full transparency, show what all the risks are, but then say, yeah, but here's how you fix all these things. Don't leave with despair. Leave better informed, maybe a little bothered, a little concerned. I want that, because otherwise you're not going to fix anything. Right. But at the end, oh yeah, now I'm glad I know it, because that guy, Jeff, told me about it, and he's told me how to fix it, versus the bad guys. They're going to figure it out, and they're not going to tell me how to fix it. They're going to exploit it. So that's my message. And we're all.
I think that's a perfect ending. Like I said, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I learned a ton, and maybe at some point in the future we'll have a part 2 and come up with a totally different set of conversation to have. So
I'm sure I'll make up something for that then too.
Hey, I love it. I really appreciate it.
Okay, I appreciate it too. Thank you. Okay, what in the heck?
I know that's a security feature of some kind, but
yeah, security is a waste of time.
Okay, end of show.